On behalf of the St. Luke's Medical Guild, I welcome all our viewers to this panel discussion. Our topic for the day is the role of the St. Luke's Medical Guild doctors in the current COVID crisis. Let me begin by introducing our panelists. We have on my immediate left, Dr. Brenda Menezes, who is the current president of the Guild and a consultant dermatologist. Then we have Dr. Roshan Nazareth, who is in charge of the COVID Care Center at Kandoli. And we have Dr. Philomena D'Souza, pediatrician and palliative care consultant. Dr. Nazareth and Dr. Philomena are members of the current executive committee of the Guild. And myself, Dr. Gladstone DeCosta, an orthopedic surgeon and a life member of the Guild. Now, the World Health Organization has described the current pandemic as the most serious global health emergency in history. And that appears to be a slight understatement, if anything. It seems to me that we are all facing a severe existential threat. Our total helplessness in its vice-like grip has only matched our apparent ignorance of the disease, which I'll be referring to later on. This extreme situation puts the members of the Guild in a rather unique situation, because we as doctors have a commitment to our profession by way of our professional guidelines as decreed by the Medical Council of India. But then we are Catholic doctors, and that makes a slight difference, because we have, in addition to our professional commitment, we have a moral commitment which has to comply with our membership of an organization like the Medical Guild. Most often, these two issues go along together quite satisfactorily, but sometimes there may be problems. Our moral commitment to the Guild, by virtue of our membership to the Guild, sometimes may cause a little difference of opinion, if you like. I wouldn't say a clash with our professional commitment. And I often wonder how we cope with it. And I think I'll call upon our president, because she's in the best position to tell us a little more about this. So, as a president of the St. Luke's Medical Guild, what guidance do you feel that the Guild gives to doctors to cope with this anticipated conflict of interest, if you like, but it's not quite so strong always?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Gladstone. I don't know if I'm the best person, but I will try my best. Well, it is very difficult and challenging for us as Catholic doctors in today's world to, be able to witness to our profession and our calling. So it's not just a job, it is like a calling, a responsibility, and a vocation. Because we have to go against what society dictates. And in the present day world, we know how difficult that can be. Because we now have to witness to Christ's healing love and compassion to our patients. And that is why I said it is a vocation. Thus, we try to keep the patient's highest good in mind, according to the Hippocratic oath that we took when we first became doctors, to primarily look for the highest good of the patient, but above all, to do no evil. And that is a tall order. Sometimes even being unmindful of our, remuneration or even our personal preferences. I think it is only possible through God's grace and immersing ourselves into the life of the church through the sacraments, through scripture, through prayer, because that is what forms our consciences. To this effect, we in St. Luke's Medical Guild have regular programs for our spiritual formation, whether it's retreats or recollections. But we also have seminars and talks to update our medical knowledge, especially in light of the church's teachings. So we dwell on the documents of the church and focusing on topical issues that deal with the sanctity of life, life from the womb to the tomb, as Saint Pope John Paul II would often say. Now, as part of our contribution to society, we organize various outreaches to the old aged home. Some of us even advise them on their health problems. We also organize a yearly prison camp. So this is a part, in a small way, of our contribution to society. And sometimes we even have seen patients, poor patients, free of charge, needy patients, and we give our consultation where it is required. Now, in these current COVID times, our responsibility becomes all the more greater, and we are being challenged to even greater heroism, I think I can use the word. And it's all over the world we have seen. We as doctors and healthcare workers become the front line defenses, and many of our doctors working from the St. Luke's Medical Guild are in the Goa Medical College and in the health services, working, overworking sometimes, and putting themselves at great personal risk. Not only themselves, even their families. And you can imagine how much of stress this causes them. And sometimes this is even in the face of anger, of false allegations, abuse, which unfortunately we seem to be seeing only in India. So it is very demoralizing for doctors and healthcare workers to be in this scenario, in this present day circumstances. So some of us further in the St. Luke's Medical Guild also have volunteered our services to the Indian Medical Association, of which we are also members, and we do this as daily monitoring of the home isolated asymptomatic patients or just mildly symptomatic. So we make daily phone calls and monitor their symptoms if they have, or their charts, basic charts that are issued to them by the health services. So this helps in the long run to take the burden off the health officers who have a huge number of patients to look after. In addition, many of us, and most of us I would say, who are in private practice, continue to run our OPDs, our clinics, and using all the necessary precautions laid down by the various standard operating procedures. And in addition, some of us who may be senior citizens or have comorbidities also continue with telemedicine or online consultations, maybe by phone or sending pictures by WhatsApp. Since I'm a skin specialist, I have to see the photographs, very clear ones, and take the history, etc. So in this way, we are contributing our might towards this control of this pandemic by also our advices, consultations, and I think this is our small contribution about St. Luke's Medical Guild, and I think it's very important to always be in union with the Lord in prayer to get our strength, our protection, even our own healing. Yes.
I think you introduced two phrases which I feel are very significant. You said, do no harm, which is part of the medical ethics. And then you said, do no evil. I think these two phrases bring out the difference, I wouldn't say the difference, but the commitment to the profession on the one hand and the commitment to the guild on the other. So I think that was a beautiful choice of words because it brings out precisely what
you.
I had in
Yes.
mind.
Thank you.
Okay, so from that holistic viewpoint, let's come down to brass tacks, the ground level. COVID patients are generally broadly in two groups. There are those who are symptomatic and need to be hospitalized where they are under constant medical supervision. And then there are those who are asymptomatic but have tested positive. And the current policy of the government is to give them the option of home quarantine or quarantine at a COVID center. These are the two options. Now, unfortunately, for whatever reason, the COVID centers came in for some heavy criticism in the initial stages. There were complaints about sanitation, about toilets, about people not getting hot water. We have a brother of a MLA from Vasco, and he complained bitterly that he couldn't get hot water while he was quarantined. And there are other issues. Then there is the issue of stigma. If you are a patient and you're either in a COVID hospital or in quarantine, then there are situations where that patient and the family have been ostracized. To give you an example, I have where I stay, there is a doctor 2 houses down who was tested positive and chose to do home quarantine. Her house is constructed in such a way that she can go from her room to an open terrace exclusively for herself. From the other side, there were complaints that she is not taking precautions. She is wandering around on the terrace with a mask on, without a mask on, and quite gladly she sent off a fiery email to the local Punch explaining exactly what she's doing to stay within the law. So Dr. Nazareth, with the background of all this that has gone before, and without saying, passing an opinion on whether it was right or wrong, what is the current situation with the COVID centers as well as the issue of stigma?
Yeah, initially there was a lot of stigma towards patients of COVID. When they were tested positive, their family members themselves had difficulty in relating to the patient, and the neighbors would all call us up and say, see, make sure he's not home isolated because he's going to roam all over the place, and even if he's coming out of his house, we are going to get it. And we had a lot of these issues when the home isolation first started. Basically what we offer, once we have the patient tested and he's found positive, it becomes very difficult for the patient first of all to accept. And the worst scenario is when they're asymptomatic. So when they are asymptomatic, they practically start arguing for nearly 5 to 10 minutes because obviously it's a setback for them. They've come to the OPD because they are high-risk contacts of a positive patient and they tested positive. They really don't know what to do. So we have to calm them down. We do calm them down, and then we offer them the option of home isolation or going to the COVID care center. Now, home isolation is offered only if they have a room with an attached bathroom and toilet. And for those who don't have, or they have difficulty in managing the SOPs that are required to be followed, like having of the thermometer, the pulse oximeter, etc., the delivery of food at home, then we offer them the COVID care center of the government. I'm in charge of the Kalangut COVID care center. We have 2 blocks there. One is Kalangut Residency and Kalangut NX, which consists of around 122 beds. So over the past 3 months, we have already we have already admitted 747 patients there for the last 3 months. And initially, there were a lot of complaints of many things as we were in the starting problems. But after 15 to 20 days, we have everything in place. Every room has got a heater, flask, or he has got a water heater, kettle there to help himself out. Plus, we give them the basic medicines that are required, the tonics that are required for them. And they are given food by the district administration as well. The meals are provided for them. We are also now, of late, the collector has helped us in appointing the special agency for biomedical waste collection with a person stationed there every day. This has also happened for the last 10 days. So as days go by, it is just getting better. And we are also having good reviews from the patients who are coming to the COVID care center when they have no possibility or very difficult possibility of getting home isolated. Though we all try to recommend them home isolation because there is nothing better than home food. But wherever it's not possible, we offer them this COVID care center isolation. Because the whole crux of the reason for isolation is to move them out from a community so that they do not transmit it to others. And it takes a tough time for us to tell the asymptomatic patient. As far as testing is concerned, we test now in our government setup, in our health services. We do the antigen testing as the first line. And for all those symptomatic who turn negative, then out of the negatives, all the symptomatics we send for the RT-PCR to the district hospitals or Goa Medical College. And when we get the reports, we do their investigation, track down their contacts, and only the symptomatic contacts or the high-risk contacts or the comorbid contacts are called for testing to the respective health centers the next day. So this way we are able to isolate the positives from the negatives. The family is then quarantined for the same period as the positives are quarantined. The punch members help them out a lot in this. They also choose a caregiver from the locality who is negative, and that's how the whole family along with the positives are able to come out of this COVID infection.
That was very reassuring to know that we've come a long way from the initial days, because there was quite a lot of criticism initially, and it's reassuring. You still get the occasional complaint about food, and the biomedical waste problem, I think, was a little underestimated. In fact, that was one of the problems in the example I gave. And we've established a number where we have to contact that person separately from, we've got our own waste disposal system within the colony. So if there's a situation like this, then we call up the person and they come and collect so things have moved on. The important point being that we all started off with this huge unknown, which I'll be dealing with later. And however much the public confidence in us, we were in a dark area. So as we go along, things do evolve, and fortunately for the better. So from there, I will come to another issue which I can only describe as the elephant in the room, because nobody wants to talk about it. It's been badly neglected, and we don't hear about it much. And that is the tremendous stress, both on part of the doctors as well as the patients. The doctors are concerned, is that preventive equipment efficient? Am I going to get infected? Am I going to pass it on to my family? The patient is worried because the isolation, the loneliness have their effect on the patient. And sometimes it's the dread of the disease. Am I going to get better? And this is not just, what should I say, a hearsay or something that has occurred occasionally. I mean, the statistics are alarming. You have, on a matter of record, that doctors have a 30% higher rate of suicide compared to the normal population. Already statistics are showing that there's a slight increase in suicide related to the pandemic for the general population. People are looking into whether this has reflected onto the medical population, but that will be revealed shortly. So I would like to address this question to Dr. Philomena, because you have a lot of experience dealing with anxious parents, dealing with palliative care as your current consultant. And I'm sure this problem, which is basically linked to anxiety, what are your feelings about this? Is this question of mental stress overdone or underdone? And if it is not being, if there is a question of mental stress, I'd like to preempt by asking you, Is there a role for counseling in all this?
Thank you, Dr. Gladstone. At the outset, I need to clarify that I am not a mental health professional, number one.
I appreciate that.
And number two, my experience has been limited to dealing with home care patients and also with healthcare workers in hospitals and in transit. I'd like to begin at the beginning, when in March we were a happy, unaffected lot in Goa. And everything was happening elsewhere, and we didn't think anything would happen here. Then we came to April, May, and things started happening, but the usual Goan attitude of complacency is not going to happen to me and is not going to touch us. But now we are in a state of helplessness because we are denying the fact, not only because of lack of knowledge, but we are feeling so utterly helpless to face the situation. And the key word here is that this infection has caused distress. The distress is for everybody without exception.
Yeah.
We have distress for persons infected and affected by the virus. We have distress for healthcare workers. We have distress for government, people in government, business, industries, trade unions. So there's distress everywhere. There is no exception. And the reaction to distress has been variable because human nature being what it is and our upbringings being different, there is always going to be a variation in the way we react to these situations depending on so many factors which I cannot elaborate. But I would like to again go over those feelings that everybody will experience, and that is of anger. Anger that this thing is happening to us, to me, to the industry. It leads to frustration, depression, and as you rightly mentioned earlier, suicide, not only amongst doctors but everywhere. And the fact that you're isolated, alone, lonely, not knowing what to expect, really creates havoc in anybody's mind, be you an educated person, professional, literate or illiterate. Across all strata of society, this distress and helplessness is unique and universal. And that is what makes our problem of mental well-being in this situation so difficult to manage. Now, just let's look at the healthcare workers. We belong to that, right? We were always taught as a doctor, nurse and others, look at the patient side of things. There must be empathy, feel for your patients. But today I see that things are going in the reverse direction. We have now reached a situation where we want the patients and people to understand that we are also human beings.
Yes.
We have families.
Yes.
We have a job to do. And more importantly, we have a God to whom we are responsible to. All right? So now we are expecting compassion from people. We are expecting them to be empathic. But it's a tough situation. And many a times I know nurses, technicians go home from their duties and they feel like outcasts in their own families, in their own societies, in their own communities. So while I agree with Dr. Roshan that things seem to be getting a little better now, it is probably as a result of the fact that we are addressing the issue of misconception of facts. We're trying to understand the disease for whatever little we know is true. We're trying to avoid misunderstanding what it might be or what it might not be. But most importantly, we've got to realize that it has affected everybody, rich or poor. And the economic ruin and chaos that we are anticipating is something that I think none of us really know the magnitude of what it's going to be like. So now, what I would just summarize in saying that there is distress everywhere, all strata of society. Our emotional well-being has reached rock bottom. And the need of the hour is for each and every one of us to reach out to each other. We need to join hands in understanding this disease, in fighting the stigma, and in overcoming this universal battle.
But if I may just well, what do you feel about counseling in relation?
I'm coming to that, okay? And since our chairperson asked me to speak about the counseling, yes, counseling is one of the ways in which we can do it. But counseling cannot be effective if you have not gone through this experience, either in a hospital or in the home setting. Because that's when you realize that if the virus was outside your colony, it was fine. The moment it comes to your doorstep or into your house, you are in a mess. And that's where what you say is correct. Counseling, help, somebody to give you advice is very, very essential. And that's where we as doctors will come in. And the IMA, I think, has taken a wonderful step in this direction. And I appeal to all our St. Luke's medical doctors to do whatever they can in the areas where they live to reach out to people in their neighborhoods, in their parishes. And last of all, I would say it's very important that all of us rediscover God in our lives. We need to be transformed. It doesn't matter who you pray to, but we need to bring back God into the center of our lives, because He's the only one who is going to bring some peace to this madness that exists.
Thank you very much. That was short and very much to the point and covered all the issues that I had in mind. Now, we've covered 3 aspects of the current health crisis, but there is more. I said earlier, right at the beginning, that we are dealing with a huge unknown. Let me just take you through the history. We were told it was a virus, very straightforward. Now we are told that the virus mutates. There was a patient who went from India to Singapore, and they discovered in Singapore that the version of the infection he got was a mutation. Then we were told initially that there were 3 main symptoms. Today, we are told that there's virtually every system in the body can be affected. Initially, it was cough, fever, and breathing difficulty. Now, you can lose your sense of smell. You can have an unstable gait. You can have clotting problems with your blood. You can have heart problems. You can have problems with your bowel, just about everything. So then, of course, there's treatment. Hydroxychloroquine. Is it useful? Is it not useful? It was useful, then a paper. It's not useful, then a paper. It is useful. I mean, it's equally confusing to the public as well as to the medical profession. And antivirals. We don't have a specific antivirals. So the sum total of this is a mass of uncertainty. And when the patients are, mind you, they have, particularly patients and relatives, they sense this uncertainty. And then that reflects in a hostility. And the next step is physical assault. We have had a doctor being stabbed in Latur. We had a number of instances of violence. And this is the unfortunate sequence of events, the uncertainty that aggravates it. But the second point I want to make, and I want to quote from the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. India has the highest number of rumors and misleading information on social media and online platforms. You get a juicy message on your WhatsApp and there's a temptation to pass it on. I appeal to all our viewers, if you get a message, either you do one of 2 things: kill the message, shoot the messenger, or check the veracity of the message. I mean, I've had it's still on my handset. We are using thermal guns. And there's a video going around of a chap who says that if you point the thermal gun to the center of your forehead, you are going to damage the pineal gland, which is a master gland in the brain. So I was a bit taken aback, and I actually asked the neurosurgeons if there's any substance to this, and there isn't. Whether you should point it to the forehead or the wrist or the elbow crease, that's a different issue. But you can't go around with this sort of nonsense. I mean, 2 days ago, I've got a message saying Putin's daughter took the vaccine and died. This is not acceptable. So the message here is, do not forward unverified posts. By all means, verify them before you proceed. So control the me too urge, as they say. So we have briefly tried to put in place before you the tremendous uphill task both for the patient and the doctor. And I'm sure that in this short time we have not covered all the queries that might occur to you. So what we have done is left email IDs with the CCR TV people, and if there are any queries, please do send us an email and we will definitely revert back to you. There are 2 emails IDs. One is goalaity@gmail.com and the second is our own email, which is St. Luke's Medical Guild @gmail.com. Bear in mind that St. Luke is STLUKE. The email IDs will be put on the screen by our team, so you can refer to that and feel free to send us an email with your queries. We will revert back to you as soon as possible. Thank you very much for your attention. Stay safe, wear a mask, wash your hands, and maintain social distancing.
Is it possible
Thank
to add one small piece of advice?
Yes.
For each and every one of us, if the virus affects you, don't be afraid.
Yes.
Just say, don't say, why me? Just say, try me, and I'll get over it. And the second thing is for doctors. This is a prayer that is very old, but it gives me a lot of confidence. Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Courage to change the things I have to, and wisdom to know the difference. Thank you, Dr. Gladstone.
Thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you.